Ah, beautiful artwork, artists that inspire me, reference photos, pieces I wish I could make. But how do I take it all and combine it into something new that is entirely my own?
Hello and welcome to the video. I'm a big fan of reference photos. I find that they improve the quality of my work dramatically. Now, the downside to reference photos. It's very possible to become extremely reliant on them to the point where you can't improvise. So what do you do when you're feeling really charged about imagery that you don't have access to photos of? Today, we're going to talk about how to combine reference photos, how to stop copying, but to use them for inspiration, take them apart, and turn them into the thing that you're trying to make. Let's get started.
Now, before I even got started painting, of course a lot of thought has to go into the planning stage, what you're gonna make. I knew that I was feeling a lot of inspiration from the artists I showed you earlier. I'd made Pinterest boards and pinned a very specific aesthetic of landscapes. And I also knew I was feeling a lot of inspiration from Ireland scenes I saw earlier this month, the Cliffs of Moher, the ocean. I wanted something that felt grand and atmospheric, but going through my reference photos, none of them really sparked inspiration for this new painting. So I decided to Google copyright-free images. They have different resources online you can search through that have free, fair use images that have no licenses on them. So after scrolling through for a while, I settled on an image that I thought captured more of what I wanted to work with. This gave me the basic structure for my painting, but still compositionally felt a little crowded and not quite as large as what I was going for. In the case of this image, there is no copyright issue with copying this, but I wanted to talk about the difference between copying and referencing images, not just because of legal repercussions, but because of the way it'll allow you to expand what kind of images you're making and the ways that you can combine multiple images together to create new ideas. I felt most inspired by this painting on the right. It's a James H.C. Miller painting, and so I took my reference photo into Photoshop and changed up the composition. I definitely pulled a lot of themes from the height of the cliffs and the waves in the water. Each image on its own doesn't look entirely like what my final product looked like, but when you see all of them together, you can see the clear parallels that came from each. Things like the dark and crashing water from the first, or the green of the cliffside with the grass on the second, and then elements and color schemes that came in entirely on their own. Traveling around Europe and looking at classical paintings made me think a fair amount about their lack of reference imagery and how they had to go off of things like intrinsic knowledge, academic study, and live observation to get a better idea of how to accurately portray their subject matter. There's a lot of benefit to the flexibility of understanding your subject so well that you can improvise. There's also a lot of benefit to having reference imagery, the internet, fast travel, to be able to experience and see scenes that artists back in the day weren't privileged to have. There's a very different presence to seeing things live and in person than there is to seeing them in a photograph. The epicness of a mountain, the scale of it, the way it just feels enveloping and makes you feel small, it's almost existential for me. But that looming, huge presence is something a lot of conventionally trained, traditionally trained artists bring to their work. There's a depth and a gravity that comes from live study that sometimes gets flattened when you're working from a photograph. Noticing some of those components and ideas of scale in some of the classical images I saw while I was traveling expanded some of my own aesthetic interests and desires, but in order to achieve some of those looks that I liked so much, I needed to get a little inventive with my referencing. See, while I was learning to paint, I relied heavily on reference photos. I follow a ton of artists online who do very direct copies of reference images, and I think they come out with absolutely beautiful, hyper-realistic results. And they also still handle their mediums in ways that I see as very classically trained and educated. The problem can come in when you don't want to follow reference photos entirely. I can think of a number of times in my life when I wanted to paint something, but I felt like my skill set on its own didn't measure up for me to be able to fill in the gaps of what wasn't present in the photo and make stuff up. Now, I think there's been education that's happened along the years of me working in the studio that makes me more able to do this, but the technique that I'm employing to make this image is something I think you and past me could have really benefited from. I do coaching on Patreon, and one of my favorite things to ask people to do, because it's one of the things that helped me the most in my own education, is to find artists that you really look up to and admire and do studies of their work. Now, to make a copy of someone's work is not to make your own original artwork, but it is a stepping stool and a learning tool, and when you're using it that way is extremely beneficial. Something about copying another person's technique, looking into the way they use color or make brush movements, forces you to step outside of your own methodology and try something new, and in that process you might take some things and you might leave some things. So a great next step after investigating and studying directly a person's work is to make a kind of combination of their work and your own. You can look back to those stylistic aspects of the painter you admire, but then bring in your own sorts of references, subject matter, and composition to make something that's completely different. You tend to see this if you study different artists and look at what their community of friends, the network of artists they worked with was like. Oftentimes there's a lot of ties between the things that they're working on and the ways they're developing stylistically. Over time, the more you work on your own work and push yourself, you're going to start seeing differences and new things that you're bringing to the table, ways that you're combining all the different resources and inspiration that you're consuming in order to make something very new. If you've been on this channel, you can think back to when I was first really getting into Ivan Durrell, the artist who did the background work for Sleeping Beauty. I took a lot of his techniques and implemented them into my work. And I did the same thing when I got really invested in Jenny Morgan, who's a contemporary portrait artist. I like to collect different stylistic and aesthetic ideas from them, and as time goes on, those become more and more indirect. They get blurred in with other things that I've been studying, and then comes together this completely new composition and style that's evolving. Working with multiple reference photos is sort of similar. If you're feeling held back by the references you have available, then I think that this is a really good approach for you to investigate. Not everyone has access to nature. It's not realistic that everyone will have the ability to visit landscapes so they can take their own references and create that kind of material. But there are completely moral and ethical ways that we can source different imagery online and the work of artists to inspire and educate us that are good and positive and will improve our artwork in ways that stay original. The reference image and the painting that I showed you in the beginning were only two of the things I looked at for inspiration. Other photos of different artistic works I also looked at to reference things like blending colors, or where to put in reflective light, how to create an atmospheric perspective, where to put in high contrast and low contrast. All of their different techniques went in to inform my piece. And while you could never put this artwork onto the internet, do a reverse image search and find it directly correlating to another artist's name or brand, you can, when I line up my references and my inspiration, very clearly see where I'm taking point from other people's work. By studying these different artworks and imagery, I ended up making a painting that looks fairly different from anything I've made in the past, but definitely is in line with the direction I want to be going and how I want to be pushing myself as I work to develop a new style. You see, lately I've been really interested in the idea of experiencing my own sort of renaissance. I'm definitely interested in increasing my education, doing so by studying other artists, and potentially signing up to take more art education classes. I think it could make me a better teacher for YouTube and on Patreon, and also I just want and crave the academic study that I saw present in so many of the artworks I admired while I was in Europe. This is more on the technical side of how I made this painting, but at this point I decided to take the tape off, reevaluate where the painting was at, and get fresh eyes. By taking off my tape, I have a better picture of what the actual image looks like, and then I can go back in and make tweaks. And during the finalizing detailing process is when I find my piece becomes the most elevated. So when I get new ideas or clean things up, and at this point is when I decided to put in my waterfalls. Sometimes I'll be looking at an artwork that I'm making and just little imperfections in the paint that can hint at geographical features that my mind will kind of expand, and then I can work to emphasize them so that other people can see them. And during this process is when I also did things like smoothing out my color shifts, creating a little more dimension and layering of cliff sides in my background, and firming up the atmospheric, hazy nature of the skyline where the sun is breaking through mist. I'm really happy with how this painting came out. I decided to hold on to this painting rather than sell it immediately because I want to start developing a body of work that kind of has a consistent style, and I need to keep around pieces that I make that I like to gain further inspiration from them and launch off new work. If you'd like to see how this piece affects future pieces that I make, the place you can stay most up to date with my new artwork is my Instagram account at Sealark, but I also have social media pages on Twitter, Facebook, and Patreon. Feel free to check out any of the links below.
Hope you all enjoyed that video, that it was educational. I am very interested in deeper diving into my artwork, bolstering my style, maybe even taking more classes to increase my education. So if you have any interest in following along with the videos I will be producing throughout that journey, then make sure you're subscribed to this channel, and you can follow on any of my social media accounts for more content. And I have a website, robinsealark.com. Hope you all have a fabulous week, and I'll see you next time. Bye!